So there are no mics up there right now? Okay. Microphone, and then we'll pass the microphone down because this is the best microphone we have. I will leave it in your hands.
Okay.
Take care.
I will take care of it very carefully. Yeah.
Hi, everybody. We'll ask you to move in front so that those who will come a bit late can sit behind. There are more seats here. Can you move a bit in front? Yeah, please, those who are behind, can you come in front, please? It will be much more easier for those coming late to join us then and sit behind. Nobody wants to be in front, huh? Okay, come in, please, come in. There are more chairs here. There are some more seats here. Good morning, everybody. We'll start the session. Thanks, everybody, for joining us for this 1 hour and 15-minute session that is organized jointly by IPES Food, BioVision, and IFOAM Organics, just to allow, in a line of continuity, to have a debate on the food system as it's stuck today by different crises. In 15 years, we have been facing 3 major crises that have impacted the food system. A lot has been said. There are some controversial points that has been discussed for all this time. And we continue to have debates so that we can allow to have this transition for a sustainable food system. That has been a request for different international fora. And today we have a pleasure of having a very, very relevant panel that will discuss from different perspectives the issue that we have been working on for such a long time. The first panelist will be His Excellency Haile Mariam Desalegn from Ethiopia, who has been a prime minister of his country and the chair of the Alliance for Green Revolution in Africa, AGRA. We'll have Veronica Ndetu as a coordinator of a climate change unit in the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock, Fisheries, and Cooperatives in Kenya. She is also one of the members behind the establishment and the running of a climate smart agriculture multi-stakeholder platform. And we'll have also Dr. Susan Chomba, well known by most of us here. She's the director of Vital Landscape of Africa at the World Resource Institute. She leads the institution's work on forest, food systems, and people. And we'll have Karen Mampuswa as the president of IFOAM Organics International, and is the director of the Land Resource Division of the Pacific Community based in Fiji. And we also have opportunity to give a floor to some other people. So this event is organized on the line of different debates and different writing that have been done, different controversial points. IPES Food has been working in the report that we entitled The Perfect Storm, that highlighted how the crisis, current crisis related to COVID, but also to the conflict that you are facing actually has impacted in many ways the food system, the transition of the food system that we are trying to support. And for that line, we'll have different layers of our discussion. Just starting just the first part will be dedicated to look at different perspectives from the different panelists, how they are looking at this crisis and look globally to the transition, and how, to some extent, the perspectives are around. And we'll have also an opportunity. It seems that some people are not hearing back. Are you hearing what I'm saying? Is it okay? Okay, fine. And then we'll have a range of questions to the panelists, a first round and a second round, and to have also interaction between you, because this is a space when we have to open discussion on your own perspectives, how you can come back on some of the things that your co-panelists will be saying, and trying just to clarify or have your experience also on these issues. And then we'll lastly give a floor to the audience for 15 minutes and to discuss about your own perspectives also as key players in this on the food transition food system arena. And then just to allow us to see how we can wrap up at the end. So we are 1 hour and 15 minutes. That will allow us just to go through some key points, just knowing that actually we need to go on this food system transition, because of some of the things that have been stacking us. As you realize that for the 15 years, free crisis, and because of the lock-ins that happened, and mainly people, some countries depending on importation of food, mainly on some of the very shortcut perception that some are having, trying to feed the world with some of the technologies, but also techniques that have been considered to be for some for some of the players as solutions that are not that sustainable. There are also been the funding system and related climate change debate that also is impacting our food system as a way of that working on our own perspectives on the food system debate. So these are some of the things that happen, and now it's time for us just to open discussion with the objective of trying to not only clarify the complexity and challenges in the shifting away from chemical intensive industrial farming. This is one of the objectives that you are aiming to. Secondly, to draw a lesson from well-planned and organized transition pathway. And thirdly, to share the practical policies, processes, and practices that can be implemented in multiple regions. So having said that, we'll just start the first part of this meeting, and then I will just try to ask all of you an introductory question that will allow you just to go through it and then see how we can open this interaction between the members. So for this first part, so I would like you to say in your own perspective, starting with His Excellency, in the online of your institutional background, working on the Alliance for Green Revolution in Africa, what is today your perspectives, your own analysis of the current situation related to the crisis that we are having actually?
Thank you very much, moderator. I think I want to express my feeling that COP27 has brought a number of pavilion on food systems. Of course, maybe on COP28, we need to coordinate all the pavilions to have one food systems pavilion. Of course, it's an evolutionary process, and I believe that this will come in the next COP. I have also some disappointment in COP28 before I delve into the substantive discussions. Our leaders has not mentioned, as we expect them to mention in their speech, the last 2 days on food systems than they did on energy transition and other aspects of the climate change issues. So I think we need, as collective, those who are working on the food systems, to advocate much more in a depth for the COP28, so that we get what's required for the food systems in the next COP, because we all know that the third of solutions is nature-based, and we shouldn't ignore this in our future engagements. So I think with this, my organization, AGRA, has evolved through the last 15 years in different paths. We started as an organization with the late Kofi Annan, thinking that Africa is lagging behind in food production and food systems, and therefore we need to have to address this issue in a concerted manner. So that's the basis where from his own experience in the United Nations, he has put a uniquely African green revolution, because we felt that the green revolution in earlier times had its own difficulties and shortcomings. Therefore, it should be a uniquely African green revolution. That was the idea. But that's one of the evolutions which I just wanted to mention. So we focused on production, helping farmers, smallholder farmers, because we all know, as the sons and daughters of smallholder farmers, we all know that 95% of African agriculture is done by smallholder farmers. So to me, when it comes to Africa, what does it mean by industrial agriculture is a big question that has to be addressed, because it is a mix kind of smallholder farming that is taking place in Africa. We cannot directly associate African smallholder agriculture to industrial agricultural production, because there are many natural things that smallholder farmers, from their own culture, customs, and way of practices, they do have their own, indigenous knowledge that is involved in agriculture. But nonetheless, we wanted to see how this can be sustainable because of the climate change variabilities that is affecting the African smallholder farmers more than anything else, more than any other sector. So we focused on seeds. Seeds, the basis for agriculture. And in so doing, we wanted to go for, agronomists training. More than 600 PhD professionals has been trained with the support of AGRA. That was the beginning. And by so doing, we were trying to bring seeds that are heat resistant and climate resistant, so that African farmers, smallholder farmers, become resilient to the shocks and variabilities that come from climate change. But that was not enough. In our second strategy, we said, I think looking into the production side only is not enough, because there is a need to see comprehensively the whole value chain in food systems. Until the Food Systems Summit came into discussions last year, I think we did have our own value chain approach and systemic approach. One of the issues is there is policy incoherence in agriculture, and state capacity is very limited. So we wanted to support governments and their policy prescription and policy formulation, so they help the smallholder farmers in such a way that they sustainably produce and consume and also market. So agriculture itself is a business, it's not just a production. So if we don't make agriculture a business in the whole system in a sustainable manner, then I think it cannot be, sustainable. So having said this, we need to address the market issue and the system in the market, the whole value chain. We need to address, when I say markets, input, output markets. And we have to also see the system of extension and research and development, where these systems can support smallholder farmers in a proper way. So AGRA has put in place a systemic way of doing things. And again, we all know that finance is very important for any kind of economic engagement. And the financial system is not favoring smallholder farmers. So we need to have, a system of finances that help. So I think these are the basics, systemic approach we're following in AGRA. Thank you.
Thank you very much, His Excellency. And then we'll come back to some of the points, and probably some of the panelists will have feedback on the achievement and the planning that we are having actually at AGRA level. So I will ask Karen in 3 minutes again. Also, we have 3 minutes just to try to answer to this first question. Why is a food system transformation key in achieving climate commitment? And what are some of the combination of recent crises just shows to us? Because we have been facing a lot of things. What are some of these things that you can mention as experiences at your level? And why this food system, system transformation is key in achieving climate commitment actually?
Talofa and Maloma Avanoa, thanks for the opportunity. It's a really important question. And I think we're probably speaking a little bit to the converted in this room. Everybody knows that transformation is necessary. We know that over a third of the human-produced greenhouse gas emissions come from agriculture. That's been calculated down to 2 tons per person per year, which is a bit frightening when we think about what we're responsible for. And that is, of course, largely around how we use land, but it's also about the other parts of the value chain, how we transport, how we process, and packaging is a big one, And of course, our choices as consumers, what we consume and how we consume it, are all really critical. So clearly, if we can transform that, we can make a huge impact on achieving the climate commitments. We should be aiming for not only a net zero food production system, but also one that actually can sequester and draw down carbon. I think that is really critical. But at the same time, I think there's a risk around getting too focused on that in the food system. We need to maintain a holistic approach to the way we produce food. And we also need to recognize that while we're very attached to our holy grail of 1.5 degrees, even at 1.5, there will be massive disruptions to our food production, to agriculture, to fisheries, and to economies. We estimate in the Pacific that even at 1.5, we will have economic loss of 40 to 80%. So that's huge. So our food system really needs to be around adaptation as well, helping us to adapt to climate change so that we can still eat. And that means biodiverse systems. It means systems that help us conserve water. It's systems that are nutritious, as well as those that are just providing, the general ecosystem services that our current food system is negatively impacting. So we really knew that the food system was damaging to our climate, and many parts of the world, we know it's also very damaging to our health. But the triple whammy of climate and COVID and conflict have really highlighted just how fragile our global food system is. It's also highlighted how deeply interconnected we are through the food system in a way that I think was a wake-up call for many. It also showed that when one part of that system breaks, how it impacts on all of us in different ways. It just ripples out. So I think this, perfect storm has really created a lot of momentum for systems change. And there's some things we need to think about in general, and there's really a need for a paradigm shift. We're aware of that. And we're starting to see that mindset change come through to the direction of agroecology. And we saw that with the outcomes of the Food System Summit and the Agroecology Coalition at an international level. We're starting to see more national policies promoting agroecological approaches. In the Pacific, we're seeing them promoting organic approaches. And of course, we've got things that have a huge impact on all of us, like the European Green Deal. So we really need to be thinking about what we want our system to deliver, what its purpose is, and we need to be setting targets for that transformation. If we don't do that, it won't become concrete and it won't become real. I think we also need to pay more attention to local food systems. While we are interdependent, and that's never going to stop in this globalized world, we do need to realize that we can strengthen that local component of food systems to provide resilience. To support that, we need policies and technologies, but we also need to keep people and farmers at the center of that, and fishers. That's really critical. And just picking up on something that His Excellency said around policy coherence and learning and sharing, I think we need to do that in a really structured way. And we already have an example. IFOAM Organics International has been working with BioVision on the Food Policy Forum for Change, which is a really good opportunity for policymakers to exchange about best practice and learning and how to build policy coherence, which is very challenging for any government because we know we all work in our nice little silos and in comfort. So those learning opportunities and exchange, I think, are really critical for leading to the transformation that we need.
Thanks very much, Karen, for this highlight. So we'll come back to some of the points that you have been raising, actually related to this multi-dimensional way of looking at the food system online with climate resilience and climate change. I will come to Veronique and the two. Can you briefly tell us how Kenya has been creating food system resilience through its policies and program? And what are some of the key priorities for you if you look at what is happening actually?
Thank you. Yes. In Kenya, food security is synonymous with agriculture. And so almost every policy in Kenya mentions agriculture and mentions food security. So we have the general policies that range from the Constitution, the Kenya Vision 2030, and others that provide general direction and guidance towards productivity, in agricultural productivity and food nutrition, including even the food rights of the people of Kenya. They also give direction on sustainable management of the productive resources that include land and the ecosystems. When we come directly to the agriculture specific policies, they also provide direction and guidance on specific adaptation interventions towards enhanced communities' resilience and provision of food security. So they give directions on addressing generally the food systems, so sometimes may not be mentioned as directly, but the different aspects in these policies provide guidance in addressing food systems. So the direction ranges from efficient and sustainable utilization and management of land, environmental resources, genetic crops, livestock and fisheries resources, including even the waste management of these resources. And this is towards provision of food security. The policies give guidance towards strengthening early warning systems and even disaster management. And I think we need to take note of the fact that Kenya has a very robust climate change policies that give very clear directions on how climate change would be addressed. And agriculture also is included in that under the priority area, food and nutrition security. So they also identify appropriate technologies towards addressing food security and food systems as a key in addressing, or as a key area in these policies that we find in Kenya. So then the priorities as they are given by our policies and what we consider of emergency or urgency for the policies to work is that there is need to access and use of adaptive technologies. So we need to be able to come together and avail these technologies to the farmers, and also even the consumers to be able, and other value chain players across agriculture, to be able to provide or to do what they need to do in order to ensure that food is produced and it's also available to the consumers. There's also a priority to transition from rain-fed agriculture to efficient irrigated agriculture, whereby we are addressing the production level of food system. But besides the production, most of our agriculture or our production is perishable, and also the climatic conditions are causing a lot of perishing of the produce that is produced. And so value addition is a key area in terms of addressing the food systems to ensure that the products or the produce that we get is value added, and so its shelf life is increased so that it can reach the consumers in the right quality, and it can also be able to reach the consumers in different parts of the country. So agro-processing is a key priority in Kenya. Storage is another key area, because we all know that as the climate continues to change, temperature is increasing, rain is coming at the times that it's not expected by the value chain actors, both the transporters, the producers, and any other person that is playing along the value chain system. So the climatic conditions affect them in a way that they are not able to cope. And so we need very innovative ways of ensuring that this food that as it's produced, it is harvested at the right time, it's harvested the right way. It is also transported and distributed the right way, and the storage at whichever end, whether at the producer level or at the consumer level, is done the right way. The issues of marketing need also to be addressed. It's a priority for us, because as the food is produced, sometimes it gets wasted because of lack of markets, and yet in other parts of the country or the region are having food deficit. So we also need to be able to address the issue of the marketing, so that the production is properly linked with the market. And also these markets have facilities that ensure that there is no wastage when the food gets to the markets. The other priority, of course, is food safety and the health of that food, so that it provides the right nutrients to the people that require it, so that we need to look at diversification of foods in terms of its production and also its value addition and it is consumption, so that it is available to in the right form to the people and it gives them the right nutrients. So the other question is how to make sure that the views and interests of the different national and local stakeholders are involved. And here we look at the issues of ensuring that we review our policies to ensure that there is coordination, there is communication across the food systems, that we are not having the different actors playing their own, playing separately wherever they are. We have the producers, the marketers, the transporters, even the consumers linked in by way of having multi-sectoral and multi-stakeholder kind of approach to these issues, where we ensure that government at all levels, that is at national and subnational levels, the private sector, even the CSOs, and also the other players within the food systems chain are involved, and they are able to, each system is involving or is informing the other. And so we are not having the linked kind of information flow is accurate and it is on time, and so that everybody's then is going to play their rightful role and to ensure that the food system chain is operating at the best way possible. That is how we can ensure that our people have food and they have it at the right nutritional levels. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Veronica. We'll come back to a solution just after listening to what Suzanne will be saying on her own, how you can see the current actions being taken on food and climate on the ground, looking at your experience that you are having in terms of negotiation, but what you are doing on the ground. And are you hopeful about the current trajectory that we are having actually?
I think hope is something that we all must have every day, despite the challenges that we are seeing. But I'd like to echo just what the Prime Minister, His Excellency, said here in terms of really getting the food debate to be at the forefront of our leaders' minds. Just before this COP, we had organized big virtual event that was trying to look at what will be the key issues for African negotiators at this COP. And we had a bet on energy and we had a bet on food, because obviously with the current food insecurity on the continent and being very much aware of both the mitigation potential that is within the food systems, as well as the critical role for adaptation in our food systems and building resilience, we expected that that is going to be at the forefront of the agenda of our leaders. But I think what this says to us is we still have a lot of work to do to be able to make a strong case for food. So coming back to the discussion, I work with the World Resources Institute, and we are an environment research organization. And of course, the nexus between food and the environment is very, very well known. Particularly, let me say, we've talked about the emissions that come from the food sector. What we've not had is about the adverse effects that we have from our food sector on biodiversity, on our natural ecosystems. So for instance, pesticide pollution is extremely, negative environmental impact on water as well as on human health. But apart from that, agriculture productivity on the African continent right now is primarily increasing as a result of expanding into our natural ecosystems. So unless we have sustainable intensification in the current arable lands, we are going to see biodiversity loss. We are going to see loss of natural ecosystems, natural habitats, places like the Congo Basin, which is one of the key remaining healthy lungs that is sequestering but also storing significant amounts of carbon, will no longer be there in the next 50, 60 years if we don't address aspects about how we are doing our food production. So it is important for biodiversity as well as for climate. So what are the possible solutions that we have? I think agroecological intensification is something that we need to think about very, very carefully. It's something that can offer long-term solutions. It's not a quick fix. So anybody who's looking for a quick fix, unfortunately, we don't have good news for you. It is a process that is going to involve intensive engagement on building our soil fertility. We know very well that the attempt to increase productivity through synthetic inputs can give you quick returns, but they are not sustainable. They can also have adverse impact on soil fertility in the end, because you'll end up with soil acidification, and farmers will tell you, my soil is dead. No matter how much fertilizer I'm putting nowadays, I'm not seeing increase in terms of productivity if there's continuous use. So farmers are aware of this, and what our role is now to look at solutions that are going to, at the moment, obviously not decline productivity, but in the long term, build soil health. Soil organic carbon, for instance, you cannot have plants take up nutrients if you have depletion of soil organic carbon. And you have to fix soil organic carbon with natural processes. So this is the interlinkages that we are seeing, and we need to start looking at on the sustainable agroecological intensification. We can be able to see results. And somebody will ask you, do you have evidence? Do you have cases? Yes, we do have cases. For instance, I'll give you an example. In agroecological intensification of rice production in Vietnam, we can see, for instance, 35% reduction in pesticide use, 65% reduction in the need for synthetic fertilizer, and 3 times in terms of income from the rice compared to conventional rice production, because you have diversified system that has livestock, that has fish, and that has rice in it. And that also reduces the risk for the farmers, because if one of the system fails, so for instance, if you have a failure on the fish system, you have your rice and you have your livestock. So diversifying is going to be a critical policy and a critical issue to look at when we are looking at our transitions for the food systems. Now, our current policies at regional level, at the national level, fail to capture the aspect of diversification. I think we've come at a point where climate smart agriculture has been widely accepted. I was looking at our AU policy on agriculture, including the CAADP, as well as the Malabo Declaration. There's recognition of climate smart agriculture, and it's great because it shows that at least agriculture sector was responsive to the challenge of climate change. But now we are seeing multiple shocks that are affecting our food production system. So in the last 3 years, we've had the COVID-19 shock, and then we have conflict and we have war in Ukraine that has led fertilizer prices to soar, food prices to soar. So even if you just focus on climate, you're missing other shocks that are really affecting our food systems. And so diversification is going to be important. And that leads me to my second point. Once you diversify, what do you need, second point, to look at? You have policies that are helping us to diversify. We need to look at, for instance, on the African continent, shorter value chains for food. It doesn't mean that we are saying global food trade is not important. Global food trade is important for countries that are exporting to earn foreign exchange. It's important for enabling access in countries that are importing and food nutrition. But we also have to think about domestic policies and how to cushion our food systems from shocks that we've seen in the past 3 years. So shorter value chains are going to be critical. And again, appreciate, for instance, on the African continent, we have now the new policy, Africa Free Continental Trade Agreement. And I was looking at it and seeing how does Africa after help us to ensure that the benefits are reaching to farmers. So with after, we can have shorter value chains, we can have increased trade between countries, but are we sure that that's going to have distributional impacts on smallholder farmers? WRI, we have just concluded a study that is showing if after is implemented as it is, we are definitely not going to have positive impacts on smallholder farmers, primarily because of the issues that Veronica mentioned around organization of farmers and whether they can be able to take advantage of big markets. So really looking at how we focus on farmers that have sustainable intensification, but also having aspects of aggregation and helping them to access markets locally as well as between countries. So focusing on shorter value chains is going to be crucial. Last but not least, on the policy, I was asked to look at the policies. The last policy I'd like to say, which has a lot of us who have been in the food sector have been privy to, is around, how do we structure agriculture incentives and even occasional subsidies that we see on our continent to be more aligned with agroecological intensification, as opposed to be knee-jerk reactions when we have, food shortages. And let me give a practical example. With the recent drought, of course, we've seen governments, for instance, say we are going to provide subsidies so that farmers can access fertilizers at half the price, right? And when you look at that, of course, in the short term, it looks like it's a good policy because farmers, have food challenges. But the idea about looking at long-term solutions is to think, how do we help those farmers in the long term so that they don't necessarily need to rely on short-term subsidies on fertilizers? And so repurposing the subsidies that governments would provide for that in the long term to support farmers in agroecological intensification is very, very possible. So we've seen subsidies in Malawi on fertilizers. We've seen subsidies in Kenya. We've seen subsidies in a lot of countries. So let's say that they are not do not say there are no subsidies in Africa and policy incentives. They can be there, but we just need to think about the long-term impact and see how we can repurpose them to help farmers to think long-term solutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Suzanne, for highlighting, and then you have been working on some of these solutions that you mentioned already. Yeah, just keep a mic. Can you elaborate? Can you tell us what are some other solutions that you can put forward online of a gender perspective, for instance?
Sorry?
Solutions. What kind of solution do you want to put forward? Because you have been mentioning biodiversity issue, you have been mentioning agroecology as a solution, you have been mentioning also the way of looking at the multi-dimensional way of looking at the food system today, online with climate. So are there some other solutions that you think you should really put forward? And then don't forget that you are working a lot on the gender perspectives. What are some of these solutions that can really allow women to be at front line, but also to benefit from the different opportunities that you have been mentioning here?
Yeah, thank you so much. So the solutions there's a wide range of solutions from the production side to the marketing side, value addition side, and of course to trade, as I've tried to, highlight. And you're absolutely true that solutions are not in themselves enough if they leave half of the population, which is women, that are involved in the production side, in agriculture productivity. Half of our labor force is women on the continent. But besides, if you look at if you go to any market in Africa, whether it's tomatoes or vegetables or wherever, you'll see predominantly women that are involved in really ensuring that we have access of food from the areas of production to the urban centers, to the markets that are ensuring food that is accessible in urban areas. And so solutions that would target really empowering women are absolutely crucial. And I think one of the things that we have seen from agroecological intensification is that if you invest in women, you are really focusing on a critical group of people that will ensure that we have equitable outcomes when it comes to the transitions that we need.
Thank you very much. I will come to Veronica. How can we make sure that the views and interests of different national but also local stakeholders are included in the governance system that you have been describing for the case of Kenya, but also elsewhere? How can we ensure that the interests of these stakeholders are taken into account, but also are considered to be the essential sides of a solution that we are proposing?
Thank you. As we say, each country or each local community has its own needs and circumstances. We all operate, the farmers and the value chain actors, the food systems actors are all operating in their own different circumstances. And so we cannot issue blanket recommendations to everybody. As we advocate for approaches, for practices and technologies, there is a need to test these technologies under national and local circumstances, so that as we say that this is what we are promoting at certain areas, and in this country, in this region, in this community, it is something that we have evaluated everything, the social aspects, the economic aspects, and even the environmental and even the soil perspectives in those particular areas, and being able to then come up with solutions that work for the different nations and for the different local communities. This is very key because sometimes we think that, okay, we can do all this, we can improve trade, but whose trade are you improving? We need to be able to look at the local communities and see what affects them, what affects the fact that they are not able to sell their goods, and address those specific issues. Give them the right technologies that apply for their circumstances. Thank you.
Do you have any other solution on mind that we need to put forward to sort out all the different constraints that we have actually on the food system in line with climate change? Any other solution that we want to put forward?
Okay, the other solution is that we need
in 1 minute.
Okay, fine. We need to be able to build the capacities of the people, and of course the capacities and the right technologies. I like to say, when we talk about technologies, let's not approaches, let's be specific about the exact technologies that work. Because we may say that let's not use fertilizers, or let's improve the ecosystem. But improvement of ecosystem needs the right technologies. It needs the right capacities. And of course, we need finances for that, because then the farmers and other food chain actors will not operate when they don't have the finances to implement what you give them. Thank you.
Good. I will come to the Excellency. Listening to what has been said, there is actually an increasing trend toward food sovereignty debate, but also following the Ukraine crisis and associated trade hurdles in the food and fertilizers. During this transition, what type of policy support is required to support smallholder farmers in Africa to adopt sustainable and resilient food system? If you listen to what others have been saying, what are some of the solutions that you think should be put forward just to sort out this governance problem that we are having actually on the food system in line with climate change?
Thank you again, moderator. I think at this juncture, I would like to say we should be flexible and we should be learning, because things are changing dynamically and we cannot be orthodox on certain policies and prescriptions. And that needs, we all agreed that we need a sustainable food system. And if we say, all of us, a sustainable food system is needed, and if we scientifically understand that climate change is creating havoc to our smallholder farmers, to all of us, then we need to think in a very innovative way how to address this issue. I mean, resilience is not only resilience of the ecology, ecosystem, but also people. and it is social resilience, economic resilience, and ecosystem resilience. I think it's a combination of all these. And when we talk about smallholder farmers resilience, we are talking about all these kind of resilience to happen. So to me, I think we need to come together and understand each other, and we need to, address and manage this transition in a very comprehensive and holistic manner. That calls for all of us to join hands, not just to think in terms of silos and be unorthodox so that there will not be any change to take place. I believe personally that there is a need to do that. In Africa, especially, our farmers are still in a nascent stage of their agricultural production system. And this is a huge opportunity for all of us to bring both scientific and practical solutions that can help us to address this issue. It's a pity now when something happens in Ukraine that Africa is suffering from food insecurity, which, a country, a continent with more than 60% of arable land that can be, used in a sustainable manner. I'm not talking about just, putting your forests off and then increase production and productivity by increasing land size. As I said, intensification is very much needed. We have to keep our biodiversity in a healthy manner, but intensify the existing land. A good example, our lands are very much degraded in Africa, and most of the production process is in that degraded land. How can we reclaim? How can we regenerate our land in such a way that we don't go for more forest clearing so that we intensify our agriculture? That calls for, a concerted effort. I am a believer of nature, and I am a believer of, how to do with it. In AGRA, in our new strategy, we put in place clearly and unequivocally that we need a sustainable farming practice. And we shouldn't go for only conventional practice of farming, which has degraded our land, which has created, lots of problems in our land and our farmers, which is not sustainable. So we need to come together, how to transit to a sustainable, nature-based solution to our agricultural system, especially for our smallholder farming. So I think this is a process, and we have to manage the transition very well. There is no quick fix. We have to think about it strategically. If we think only our food security and sustainable food system in terms of Ukraine, it's a failure. We shouldn't think in terms, it's a problem that can be resolved in maybe in a year or 2 years' time. But our problem is not going to solve in 2 years' time. So I think people try to associate African food security issue to Ukraine, which I don't agree. Before Ukraine, we had that problem. And after Ukraine also, it will be a problem. So I think we should dissociate these food systems talking and engagement without consideration of conflicts that are happening. This might be a problem for Europe. It might be a problem for some other countries or continents, but not for Africa per se. I mean, there are a few countries who are relying on staple foods like wheat from Ukraine and gas, fertilizer, of course, from Ukraine. But whatever, we do have our own local and indigenous solutions that we have to work on for a long period of time rather than just quick fix. So I feel that AGRA is on board now to have a sustainable farming practice than our conventional ways of doing things. But that transition calls for, a strategic view and a strategic navigation, how to go about it. And that's what I see as far as resilience is concerned.
Thank you very much, His Excellency. So I will go to Karen. Listening to all the answers from the other panelists, if you have to design actually via a successful food system transition online with climate change. How will you describe it? What can it be?
Yeah.
This picture of the successful food system transition.
A picture of a successful food system. I like that. I like visual things. But first, I'd just like to say I totally agree with His Excellency. We can't frame everything around the Ukraine crisis, but I think we also need to be a little bit opportunistic. And when we see something like the Ukraine crisis that has escalated input prices around the world, that's our opportunity to provide an alternative, because there will be another crisis and another crisis and another crisis. So we have to build our resilience generally through sustainable food production in order to be ready for whatever crisis comes next. They'll all look a little bit similar and a little bit different. But as far as what the future system looks like, I see it as it has to be an agroecological base. It has to provide the biodiversity that we've been talking about, both in the agrogenetic biodiversity is really important, but where that sits in the broader biodiversity is also critical. We need a system that supports and rebuilds what we've lost as far as pollinators go. We need to have a system that rebuilds biology in the soil. Biology in the soil is just as critical as above ground biology. A system that supports clean water, a system that allows us to be resilient to climate shocks. Seed breeding was mentioned a little while ago. Being able to work scientists and farmers together to look at that incredible Indigenous knowledge we have that knows what a lot of our resilient crops are and how they work together. And then work with farmers for breeding programs to build salt tolerant and drought resilient crops going into the future. The country of Tuvalu in the Pacific just declared its second drought emergency this year. They need to be able to grow things that will survive during ongoing extended dry periods, as does much of the world. So we need to have a system that really is holistic, and that's not just what happens on the farm, it's how we build that system together, working with farmers, working with the holders of traditional knowledge and traditional scientific understanding, along with new science, along with consumers, because we need consumers' habits to change. Can I just ask how many people in the room are food producers, even in your own garden? Oh, yay, we're a pretty resilient lot. That's great. But it is really important that all of us are engaged in that discussion to build what the system looks like, because it will. I talked to someone yesterday who said, we are food secure because we import everything. That's one version. But not everyone needs to do that. Some of us need to grow our food at home. Some of it's in the backyard, some of it's with our local farming community. So yeah, it's a really holistic picture I see of that future food system based on those principles of agroecology.
Thank you. So I would like you to react without any order to some of the things that have been said. So you have 1 minute before I go to the audience. So His Excellency wants to react. So any of you can ask, and then I will give you the mic to
I'm
react.
sorry, I shouldn't be misunderstood on the issue of Ukraine. I mean, I'm telling you, yes, I will take 1 minute, not more. But my point is that, yes, we have to grab the opportunity which is in front of us, but it shouldn't be politicized. That's what I'm saying. It should be, scientifically, it should be resolved in a way that helps our smallholder farmers and a sustainable production and consumption in the system. So that's what I just wanted to say. I mean, it's too much politicized. We don't want to play that politics in Africa because some corner of people who are raising the issue of Ukraine, they want to politicize this issue so that they get a political gain out of it. That shouldn't be on the expense of our smallholder farmers. That's what I just want to say.
Thanks very much. Who else want to react? You want to say something? 1 minute?
similarly, I shouldn't be taken to mean anti-fertilizers, okay? I think the idea is to think about long-term sustainability, is to use evidence to understand where and what kind of transitions that are required for our smallholder farmers. And it's to look not at one side of the evidence, but to look at what are the positive and negative environmental, economic impacts, and design transition pathways that are going to be sustainable. So I think sometimes when I give examples, people might say, oh, she's completely anti-fertilizers. It's transitions. And we were just having a chat with Dr. Alex Awiti here saying, if we have the options for the farmers that will help them increase productivity, lower their economic cost in the farming systems, have positive outcomes for their water sources that, by the way, they depend on them, and have positive impacts for the pollinators that they need to pollinate their systems, the farmers will make decisions in terms of whether to use what kind of inputs into their system. So I'm not being prescriptive, I'm just saying we have the job to create the sustainable food systems and work with the farmers and let the farmers choose what is working for them.
Thank you. Veronica, anything to react to what you have been hearing from the other panelists?
Thank you so much.
1 minute
Yes.
or 45 seconds.
Maybe. Okay, for me, it's that what we need to do is to look at the food systems comprehensively. I don't think we need to really keep on looking for new terminologies and approaches to use, because we know what we want. We know that we want to increase food productivity. We need to conserve our environment and ensure that we are not polluting the systems as we produce our food. And we need to deliver safe and quality food to the consumers where they are and when they need it, and particularly the vulnerable people in the developing countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this fantastic conversation that we had with the 4 panelists. So I will go back to the audience, but before going back to you, I will give the floor to Dr. Alex Awiti from the Agroecological Coalition, just to, in a maximum of 4 minutes, just to say a few words, and then I will come back. I just remind you that there are many, many people online, those who are following us by Zoom. So I don't know if there is any question that has been posed at that level. So we'll come back and then ask to the panelists.
Thank
So
you very
go
much,
ahead, Alex.
I'm very grateful to the panelists because they have basically made my job very simple. But I would like to give some examples that will help focus the conversation. So the first one is to settle the question on inputs. And I'll give a very specific example from the country where I was born and I live. And it goes as
Can you hear
follows.
at the back?
Can you hear me at the back? You can't hear me. Oh, okay. Can you hear me now? Okay, so the example is very specific to Kenya. Fertilizer use is up 36%. The adoption and use of hybrid seed is up 81%. However, maize yield has declined 23% in the last 10 years. So park that statistic. The next one is the per capita food and household income of a typical average farmer in Western Kenya, which is part of the highlands. The soils are highly rich in iron and aluminum, and they're very poor in phosphorus, for instance. So the average household income from agriculture from an 8.7, from a 0.87 hectares is $466 for a household of 8 individuals. They have 2 cows, they have 13 chicken, and they have 2 goats. They only have 1,790 kilograms of manure that comes out of the system and 1,170 kilograms of maize stover. On the extreme end of that continuum is a household that has an average income of $155 a year and has 7 members in the household, and they live on a 0.34 hectare piece of land. They generate 326 kilograms of maize a year. They are hungry 122 days. They have no food. The first household that has 0.87 acres is hungry 110 days. This must focus the conversation on agricultural transformation. Why do we have maize yield declining in Kenya when farmers are doing exactly what we're telling them? Increased use of fertilizer, use of hybrid seed. Now, what solutions can we design for these farmers who are living in these nutrient deficient, ecologically depleted landscapes? How does agroecological approaches play into this in terms of building the ecological foundation upon which fertilizer response is going to happen? I come from Western Kenya. Those soils are absolutely hammered, nitrogen deficient, and do not respond to fertilizers that are phosphorus, because the phosphorus fertilizer, the ratio of phosphorus is fixed in the soil because they are highly rich in aluminum and in iron that basically binds these mineral nutrients in the soil colloid. What do we need to release those? Susan talked about organic matter content in these soils. We talked about crop diversification to bring in the pollinators to begin to rebuild the ecological infrastructure that supports water retention, that supports rebuilding and regenerating of the soils. As the Prime Minister said, we have to rebuild the ecological infrastructure. And so agroecological approaches are not an ideology. It is the exact foundation upon which agricultural systems in Africa will be transformed. So the fertilizer conversation, as Susan mentioned, is not for us to decide. It is for us to create that path for the systems to regenerate the ecological capacity and then allow farmers to make a decision on how much fertilizer they need. And they will make these decisions. I did some work in Western Kenya many years ago, looking at conversion trajectories from forest to cultivated systems. And we could benchmark the absolute productivity level of these systems based on the original unconverted forest. And then you have everything in between. There was a woman there who had her soils look exactly like intact, undisturbed forest after 70 years of cultivation. So it is possible for us to farm as if we're farming with nature. And the farmers understand this. How do we get our very complex ecological understanding for these systems to support farmers to bolster that ecological knowledge that is been built over several years to support our scientific conversations? But I also want to say that agroecological transformation is more than rebuilding the ecological infrastructure of the soils. It has to deal with everything else that is out there, from supply chains, from the path dependence of what we teach in schools, which is not systems. We teach agronomy. How do we change the paradigm of agricultural instruction and education generally? Now, this is contained in the 13 principles of the ecological approaches. So it is not just the agronomy. It is the systems infrastructure, its value chains, its equity. It is connecting farmers to producers. It is creating jobs and through decent value chain addition. It's building the local store that creates and energizes the commerce around these villages and these communities. So let's not be fixated on the ideology of this, because it's an unhelpful conversation. I can't go to President Ruto and tell him, Mr. President, hold off on importing fertilizer. That is a conversation dead on arrival. The question is, how do we support this farmer who earns $466 a year and build them up to the median income of Kenya today, which is about $2,000? If I go to the president with that proposition as a discussion and I say, I have an investment plan for 75% of Kenyans who are living below the median income to boost them from $466 to $2,000, I think we'll have a conversation. Now, that's what we should need to think about here as a collective. It is an economic, it's a social, it is a sovereignty question. It is not just a bunch of scientists sitting here and just navel gazing and banding acronyms, as Veronica said. It is not a shortage of new terminologies. It is a crisis of existence for millions, hundreds of millions of African farmers, some of whom are my relatives. Now, this to me is imperative. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex. And so I go back to the audience if there is any reaction. So we'll take 3 or 4 because we don't have enough time. So 1 minute per person. Can you bring the mic back to Madam?
Thank you. I just have a question around conflict, climate change, and the value chains that you spoke about. We've been talking about conflicts that are external to the continent, but also conflict within the continent. We know a lot of farmers have issues getting their produce to local markets because the roads are inaccessible because of conflict. But we also know that they have inaccessibility to preserve that food because of energy crisis, both for fuel and gas to move vehicles, as well as for light and electricity in their community. And we're also having conversations around energy transition. Just wondering, in your different perspectives, talking about getting across silos of policymakers, how have you managed to come up with ideas, or what are the challenges you're facing where we're talking about farmers have produce that grow in abundance in the local communities? They cannot take it to cities where the markets are because, one, the roads are inaccessible. And so even in preserving it, they don't have electricity, but they have access to renewable energy that has not yet been harnessed.
Thank you. Yeah. Let's be a bit brief because we don't have enough time to answer 2 questions. It's also to bring your experience on the debate.
Yeah, thank you very much.
But we'll
for the
answer to
panel.
your question before ending the session. So if you can have just your experience and then try to.
It's really fast. I'm Dr. Salma Sabour, researcher in heritage and climate change. And I just want to know, how do you bring the culture aspects into the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock and Fishery? As we know that the culture shifts is the most important thing that we need in relation to consumption in general, everywhere in the world. So how the other ministries, other people working in the agricultural, livestock, fisheries realm are integrating cultural values, indigenous values and local values in their policy making in a national or a regional scale? Thank you.
Thank you. You bring the mic here. There was someone behind. Okay, go ahead, please. And we have a last one here.
Thank you. My name is Mane Nanyu from Pelham, Kenya. Thank you for the presenters. First, I'm happy that AGRA in the new strategy has considered sustainable farming. Number 2, as one of the solutions for the agroecological intensification, I suggest that it's time we capacity build our extension officers on agroecology so that they can support the farmers on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Here, there is a last contribution. Million, you asked for the floor. You asked for the floor. I will give you anyway. You don't have any choice. Go ahead, please.
I'm so sorry. First of all, thank you for everything you have presented. I think I haven't learned so much in very short time. I'm going to ask you something that I saw there in Brazil with the Black communities producing in an agroecologic way. And so I'm telling specifically to Karen and to Susan. We there face the difficulties of accessing markets, which means whenever they access, it's not valued the way it should be because it's a different product. I mean, normally the avocado doesn't tell the story if it's an agroecologic or if it's traditional, not traditional, with pesticides. So what I would like to know is, how are you dealing with the process of reselling or public procurement, other possibilities for these producers to sell?
Thank you. Million, last one. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Million Belay from the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa. I remember His Excellency Haile Mariam Desalegn when he was Dean of the Arba Minch University. He came to our exhibition and he told me that he doesn't remember, I'm sure. He told me that there are more than 114 varieties of insect, Insectae ventricosum in Ethiopia. So the diversity in our food system is very much important. I think agroecology is actually working on diversity in our food system, which is very much critical. And we live in a very diverse food country. And I think it's very much important that in the context of climate change, we promote diversity. Diversity is resilience. Well, question would be, how much diversity is central to the work of AGRA, the Alliance for Green Revolution in Africa? Thank you very much.
Good. Someone want to react to your point? Yeah, give him the floor, and then we'll just make it. I will be very short for the end. This is the last one.
Yeah, I just wanted to contribute to the discussion. I think for me, Alex and me know each other for many, many years. And we know that in the African continent, the major challenge is biomass. There's a lot of competition for biomass.
The mic?
For livestock feed, for cooking, for soil fertility. And a farmer who is producing 2 tons will have 3 tons of, very low graded maize stover. And if you want to convert that to soils fully without even using it for other things, it will cover only 10% of your land. So you degrade 90% of your land to fertilize 10% of your land. And you do that every year. So now, unless you bring a nutrient from somewhere, it could be a fertilizer, it could be a manure, it could be something else, you are playing a game and fertilize and see a beautiful plant in 10% of your land at the expense of 90% of your land. And that's what's happening in Africa. You have beautiful home gardens, but nothing outside. So if you go to the European and the American farming system, where you have 1,000 hectares of ranch, and you have an agricultural land of 300 hectares, you can keep transferring your manure from the 1,000 hectare to your 300 hectare. And there has been a build up of phosphorus, potassium for decades. You have a lot of soil reserve and you don't need any cation. Yeah? What you need is a nitrogen, and nitrogen is getting from the manure. So you can have a sustainable system in that transition for at least 10 years without applying even a single kg of fertilizer. So what we're really talking about in Africa is what is the transition? How do we make sure that 90% of that land is feeding the people today, tomorrow, in 10 years? And you have a 15 kg of fertilizer
can you
use.
Summarize, because we have to leave the room in 2 minutes.
Yeah, compared to 250 kg in the European, in the American systems. Any crop of 10 years, 1 ton needs at least 30 kg of fertilizer. You have 15 kg of fertilizer per hectare in a year in every country. So I'm a soil scientist. I understand, I know what I'm talking about. So we're saying, how do we make this transition work? So I'm not saying fertilizer, no fertilizer, organic, non-organic. How do we make sure that, the system functions? I think that's where we need to agree. And really, it's a discussion, a work in progress, but happy to be here.
Thank you very much for this contribution. Yeah. Okay. Do we have any question from the Zoom? Is there any point? No. Okay. So I will give 1 minute to each of you. Those who want to answer, of course, to questions, so that you can react very quickly.
So I'll leave the question on the conflicts to His Excellency and focus more on the energy side. You're absolutely right that for our food systems, they are so closely linked to the energy debate, and the siloed sort of approach to it is not helpful. For instance, if we want to have more irrigated systems, there's so much potential for renewable energy to power irrigation as opposed to diesel, powered petrol pumps or petrol pumps. But on the other hand, the cost of solar energy, whatever tools and equipment has been extremely high for African farmers. So really linking the energy, access to energy with sustainable food production is going to be crucial. And coming back to the question, especially on the women, on the food production side, we're seeing a majority of our women still continuing to use firewood and other sources of energy that is having negative impacts on their health. The statistics are shocking. 60% of rural women in Africa having negative impacts from the kind of cooking energy that they are using. And so it's really important to link that clean energy for cooking, clean energy for agriculture production is going to be crucial both on the mitigation side, but also on building food security. Last but not least is the question on the competition. I think how do we actually ensure that products or produce from agroecological systems do have good access to markets, but also good market prices. I think it's a big problem, and that is part of the reason that is holding back adoption of agroecological transitions or agroecological produce, primarily because the market is not providing the signal that if there's any kind of a produce that is coming to us, we are prepared to pay a premium price for it. Now, we've gone through the whole debate about certification. We know certification hasn't been very economically viable. And even there are so many ways in the system that people cheat when you come to certification. So I think it is going to take a whole systems approach to look at how do we create incentives, policy incentives, market incentives. We just came from a session with His Excellency where the big banks are saying they are looking at ways of working with farmers and ensuring that whatever, for instance, if farmers want to access capital for agriculture, that it's linked to, for instance, less use of inputs and more transition towards agroecological transitions. And I think with that, you start getting signals both from the finance institutions to the market, from the consumers, and that will drive adoption. But as long as those are not giving the signals, I think the chances of having big premium prices and access to finance is going to be difficult. So the conversation, we need to have the conversation with higher level actors from the markets to the finance and government institutions in creating the enabling policy environment for us to see huge shifts in terms of demand for agroecological produce. Thank you.
Thank you, His Excellency.
Yeah, I think I want to convey a message in this gathering. We don't need to throw stones on each other. Rather, we should come together and discuss on this transition in a proper sense. And I invite you, some of you who declined to come to our AGRF in different forums, to come and have a session where how to transit into the agroecology way. I mean, none of us are hating agroecology because that's nature. But the thing is, we should be practical, pragmatic, and serve our own smallholder farmers. So our objective is common, but we are just trying to make orthodoxy on our ideological kind of thinkings. Let's stop that and bring changes to our smallholder farmers in a very pragmatic and scientific way. So it needs us to come together. Second, conflict is all over the world now. Now we are talking about conflict at a global scale, continental scale, countrywide, and a small scale at the village level. So conflict is always there. As far as poverty is not eradicated in Africa, you have to expect this conflict will continue. So I think it's a fight for resources, a fight for power. It's a fight for capturing. So I think this will be reduced if we really change the lives of our people. That's the main area. Of course, the governance issue is there. We have to deal with governance issues very well. So we do have very good culture in Africa. We do have our own indigenous knowledge. We do have our own, things we have been solving shocks that existed in the lives of our people. So I think we can use this knowledge to scientifically to address the issues. So I think this is where we have to engage, and idea is very important, but practice is much more important. So let's come together.
Good. You think that time is up? Should we leave the room? Okay, so just very quick. So you have 1 minute, then 30 minutes for Veronica and 30 minutes for Karen, please.
Thank you. I will start with the issue of one farmer doing this and being able to get enough for sustainability in their one household, and another one suffering in the neighboring and the same situations, because maybe they are doing things differently. And for me, the issue is what we need to look at. Why are most of our farmers are not able to feed themselves and access them, the the resources that they require to run their households and families, and considering that they are relying on farming. The issues cannot be looked at from just one perspective, that you're just looking at the soil. Of course, we know the soil is very key. And so you need to look at why is the farmer, and that's why I said that we need to look at the local circumstances. Why is this farmer not able to access the technologies? Is it because we have not promoted agroecology to them? No. It is because of other factors that they are not able maybe to improve their soils.
Okay.
In Africa, in Kenya and other places,
time is up.
most of the people just do farming, no soil testing. And so even what the soil needs, nobody knows.
Yeah.
And so even if you say agroecology, you need to know what that soil, because the farmer needs immediate food. I mean, food immediately. So you need to be able to provide them with that immediate solution. If you don't provide any other solution, they'll do fertilizer and it will not work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Veronica. 15 seconds.
15 seconds. I will
She
bring
told
us.
me that you gave her with 15,
I can do that.
15 others.
I thought I'd bring us back to Egypt just for my last comments, because we all need some moments of inspiration. And I had the good fortune to go out to visit a Greening the Desert project last week, organized by SECEM. I encourage you all to Google it, and saw an incredible example of agroecology at work, building the biomass they need to continue the composting, use of solar power for irrigation, now working with engineers so they can work out how to run their irrigation at night. There is a school growing up around this project. It really demonstrates the power of using an agroecological approach in a place that is desert. There was nothing there. So please Google it, get inspired. There is a lot that we can do when we work together.
Thanks a lot. So we'll have a round of applause for our panelists. I know that there is no time for making a summary, just to thank you all, His Excellency, with Karen, with Veronica and Susan, for your time and this fantastic contribution. And the conversation will continue, because if we want to fix the food system, we really need to have such conversation, honestly, but also very deeply. So thanks a lot. And we close the session here, and hoping that there are more and more in this room that will allow us to highlight some of these points. Thank you very much. We have some